2024 is just a strange year. Hey, I am Chuck the Bureaucrat, and I want to point out a powerful but strange phenomenon that's going to be unfolding in the halls of the federal bureaucracy during 2024. And don't worry, this is absolutely routine, and I guarantee you that the old hands, they know exactly what's going on. But for you new guys, well, you'll see what I mean. I am posting this video in June of 2024, which means we are headed into a presidential election. Normally, we talk about the federal budget process as an annual process. And when we describe the associated processes, like force structure decisions and hiring and contracting, well, we talk about them as if the annual budget process is the big driver. But the every 4 years presidential election cycle, well, it tends to add an even bigger driver on top of all of this. And until you've been through a presidential election cycle like 2 or 3 times, it's hard to pick up on the entirely predictable patterns. And before I get to the details, let me point out that a presidential election tends to frustrate the federal civilian hiring process. It frustrates the offices who are doing the hiring, and it frustrates the people who are applying for those jobs. Okay, so the key events in a presidential transition are the actual election in early November and then the inauguration in January. And that timing is unavoidably going to clash with some of the key moments in the PPBE process. Now remember, I normally think of PPBE backwards, like execution, budget formulation, programming, and planning. Not just because most folks are more familiar with execution, but also because the milestones with execution and budget formulation are much more precise than those for like planning and programming. Okay, within execution, the end of the fiscal federal year is September 30th, and Congress is supposed to have enacted a new budget for the next year by October 1st, but I'll be honest, that's getting rarer and rarer. In a presidential year, it is far more likely that a new budget for FY25 is just going to get delayed. First, just because all the politicians are waiting to see who wins the big contest in November. And then, if there is a change in administration, there might be further delay while Congress waits for the new president to have a crack at influencing the budget. And now might be a good time to point out that even if a president does get reelected for a second term, there's no guarantee that there still won't be a lot of change. A second-term president isn't really concerned about re-election. They can change their policies, and in a lot of instances, they have to rotate out a lot of their political appointees. So even if you keep the old president, he might want to rethink the budget he originally submitted. The next part of PPBE, working backwards, is the budget formulation process. The president is supposed to send his new budget proposal, in this case for FY26, to Congress on the first Monday of February. But you can see that if the president is getting inaugurated at the end of January, well, he might want to make some changes to that budget before he sends it over to the Hill. And it is not going to help matters that it can take months for a new president to get all of his political appointees through the Senate confirmation process. And as soon as those characters get confirmed, well, they're going to want to affect the budget. Now, you might expect that the planners and programmers who've been doing the preliminary work for FY27 and 28, that they're not really concerned about a change of administration. But they have to be prepared for changes in the national security strategy, changes in force structure, and the size of government. All right, but so what? Well, let's talk about what this means for you, particularly in the hiring process. Well, this transition comes with a lot of uncertainty. Politicians from both sides of the aisle like to make a show of shrinking government. And a lot of times, what that translates into is reducing the number of federal employees even if it causes an increase in the number of contract employees. So, as a presidential election approaches and then unfolds, there's a real hesitancy to hire federal employees, and particularly the SES. As a result, the normal vacancies emerge, but they don't exactly get filled. More and more deputies have to step up to serve in an acting capacity. And while there are going to be interviews, top candidates are going to have to sit around, sometimes for months, before they find out what's going on. The other thing that happens is, well, some decisions just have to be made. The size of the training base, recruiting goals, training exercises. You can't just sit around waiting for someone to tell you what to do. But if the decision makers guess wrong, you could spend 18 months trying to smooth things back out. Meanwhile, all the troops down in the field are wondering, what the heck is going on here? Now let me be clear. None of this is inherently bad or wrong. And like I said, there are hundreds of old dudes at the Pentagon who have been through this process many, many, many times. They know how to minimize the chaos, but minimizing doesn't mean eliminating. And there are plenty of Pentagon newcomers, 3 and 4 stars, who have just spent the last 12 months thinking about how they are going to shape national politics. So at the end of the day, the next couple of months are going to be a little offbeat in a way that demands more from each and every one of us. And so, as always, remain professional and take care of each other.